Texas Monthly is one of our favorite destinations for in-depth, attention-grabbing journalism. And that's also made it a gold mine for Hollywood producers. As many as 50 Texas Monthly pieces are in the process of making their way from print to screen. That's 5-0. Those projects often end up at places like HBO Max, Paramount Plus, Netflix. We'll get to Netflix in a second in particular. And that's why I'm so excited to have Texas Monthly's executive producer, yes, Texas Monthly, the magazine, has its own executive producer for TV, film, and podcasts, Megan Creydt, on the Sunday Long Read podcast as part of our new season, Source Material, about journalism's adaptation boom and what it means for the future of storytelling. A quick note before we get into the conversation: if you like the show, please consider subscribing and liking it on your app of choice. And if you're new here, welcome. The Sunday Long Read podcast is an extension of the Sunday Long Read newsletter, which you can read and subscribe to for free at sundaylongread.com/subscribe. Sunday Long Read, the movie, coming soon. We'll see. But for now, we're going to talk about Texas Monthly. And as I mentioned, Hitman is going to be debuting on Netflix in June, starring Glenn Powell. Today, though, it's all about Megan. Megan, thank you so much for joining the Sunday Long Read podcast.
Thank you for having me. It's an honor to be here, Jacob.
Oh, it's our pleasure. And I do want to apologize, but I am going to start with the hardest question, I think, which is, what exactly does an executive producer for film, TV, and podcasts do at a place like Texas Monthly?
I stay very busy, actually. And
Sounds like it.
Funny enough, this wasn't a role that existed before, so I've been figuring it out over the years. I've been working in the TV film development space for almost 5 years now, and had sort of the benefit and the curse of not having any idea what I was doing coming into it. So that's meant that, we've probably gotten to be a little bit more creative than we would have been if we knew all the rules going in. And obviously it's been a learning process. But I spend now, given the success that we've had in this space, I spend probably 90% of my time in the TV film development space, and then podcasts and a few other hats. As you know, everybody in journalism ends up wearing many hats these days.
Exactly. That's why I'm here. And why don't we tell that story? So what is it? 5 years ago, how did you get this role?
I raised my hand in a meeting, having no idea what I was getting into. Our editor-in-chief, we learned that we had changed agencies and had a new agent and a new team coming in around us. And there had been a person at Texas Monthly who'd handled a lot of this stuff over the years, who had recently retired. So I raised my hand to just sort of be the point of contact for CAA. And little did I know, it's not just CAA, it's a whole world of people and projects that have developed from there.
Yeah. And what was your understanding, expectation of what the world of Hollywood was like at that point? And then how did you begin to learn how it really works?
I don't know. I mean, I was really daunted at the beginning. And I think the thing that has been so much fun is that, it's talking to a lot of people who care about great stories, which is, what I love about working in journalism and have always been drawn to is, great long form storytelling, especially. And my job is easy in many ways because Texas Monthly does publish and has for 50 years now actually been publishing these incredible features that are ripe for development, that give people a lot to work with and give them stories that they're not used to seeing from other publications.
Yeah, why don't we just dive right into that? Because I'm fascinated by what the adaptation process is, especially, like you said, given a lot of these pieces that are being mined, that are being turned into various video projects are older, right? 10, 20, 30, 40 years deep in the archive. So how are these being discovered? Is it on your end? Is it people coming to you? Where does this process start?
It's different every time, but I can tell you I've probably read more Texas Monthly than anyone at this point, and it's one of my great joys to go sort of digging into the archive. Just thinking about some of the great staff writers who have come through Texas Monthly over the years. Lawrence Wright was a staff writer for a number of years, and just searching his byline, I came across a couple gems that we've got in development right now. So it's a lot of that. It's I sit on the editorial team, and so I have line of sight into what's getting published and what, I have a sense of what people are looking for, what's a good fit. But we also I think the magazine, long before I started doing this, the magazine was always kind of known in Hollywood as a great place to look for stories. So there were a lot of people already paying attention to what we're publishing. And I think with the progress we've made in the last few years, there are that many people looking to find the Texas Monthly story, for them. So there is a lot of incoming interest as well.
Yeah, I'm sure when you're the one or your team is looking through the archives, what are you looking for? What triggers in your mind like, oh, this is maybe something worth exploring?
I mean, it's interesting. It's different depending on the end product, but the thing that's always the same is great characters, a great sense of place. Often it's just, it's an entry into a world you might not have known about before. But one of the things that I learned actually in the last year when we were celebrating the 50th anniversary that I think is a testament to the storytelling Texas Monthly does and why there are so many stories that fit this bill is Bill Broyles was our founding editor-in-chief, who went on to be an incredible screenwriter. He wrote Castaway, Apollo 13, Miami Beach. I mean, he's a legend in that space. And in him talking about the first year of the magazine, he talked about handing out Tom Wolfe's The New Journalism, which was handing that out to everyone on staff. And the idea was, you're not a removed observer, you're in it, and we want to be in the scene and we want to sort of feel the emotions. And so I think that stuff that makes for, that helps you visualize what the story could be on screen has been built into the way that we put together long form.
Yeah, that's fascinating. And how good would you say you've gotten at being able to predict what is going to generate interest or what might be the hottest commodity when you pull it out or when it makes its way around town?
I know it's good when I see it. I do feel confident about that at this point. And I also, one of the great things about what I get to do is I talk to a lot of people. I've probably done like 120 general calls, meaning just introductory meetings with folks over the last year.
Who are those people? What is that kind of person that you're talking to?
They're writers, they're directors, they're production companies, they're studios, teams at studios who are looking to build out their slates. So it runs the gamut. And the fun thing is when I do my research and then when I talk to them and get a sense of what they're excited about and the kinds of stories that they gravitate to, I have this wealth of material and get to have that sort of spark of, oh man, they might love this story. And so it's a lot of, I feel like I'm matchmaking in some ways, stories that I love with people that I think, could tell them in a way that would be really exciting.
Yeah. And how has that approach or that process evolved over the last 5 years for you all?
Well, I think we have a much better sense of how to put our projects together. It's been a really interesting couple of years in Hollywood with the double strikes and with the pandemic and all the things that have gone on there. So, we've gotten a little bit more creative, I think, in how we put our projects together. We've actually invested in a couple of documentary features that feel akin to the magazine, but actually aren't based on our IP. And so, we're sort of branching out into that space a bit. And then, there was a period of time when I started where people were really excited about limited series. And Love and Death is a great example of something that came out of that on HBO Max. And but in this landscape, it's not that you can't get a limited series made, but you've got to have a unicorn of a project with a big star, and all of the stars have to align in order for that to go forward. So I'm looking at our stories differently these days, because people are looking for, everybody wants a contemporary story now because it's cheaper, and they want an ongoing story because they're getting return on their investment. They don't have to reinvent the wheel every time. So that just means I'm looking for less for stories that have an incredible beginning, middle, and an end for television, and instead for the worlds and the characters. And then there's features, which is a whole nother, for those, that process feels, like the direction we're going with a lot of our stories that would have otherwise been limited series in previous
Yeah.
years.
And do you feel like that has changed the way stories are pitched, assigned, written, or is this kind of more an evolution and after the fact how to best leverage the work that Texas Monthly has produced?
Yeah, I don't think it's changed anything about our editorial process. I
Mhm.
do know that, we have a number of writers who've gotten a taste of the excitement of having their stories optioned. And so, I think it has sparked something in them to really think about finding stuff that might be exciting to see on screen. But it hasn't changed the balance of what we're doing, what we're reporting. We've always sort of had a mix of great yarns and then really, deeply reported political features and food coverage. And, we have a barbecue editor and a taco editor, and, all of that stuff continues apace. But I think we all have a sense of, if we do something great, people are paying attention in this moment. And that's been really fun, I think, for all of our staff.
Yeah, absolutely. What is the typical staff member reaction when they find out, that this is a possibility and then it's happening? Like, I'm curious, kind of how they handle this new world.
Um, it's excitement, because so often it's a big name, it's someone they recognize
Hmm.
who's read their story and is really excited about it. Like there's no greater compliment than someone wanting to sort of, to be inspired by the work that you've done. And then, it's the thing that I have to do a lot of is just reminding people that it is a total crapshoot. There are a
Mm.
million things that could go wrong. We could get all the way to actually filming and something could go wrong in the production, it won't come out into the world. So there's that. And then there's just, the pace at which things move in Hollywood can be lightning fast. But a lot of times, it's a many year process with lots of fits and starts. And so I try to set everybody up to understand that, like, this is awesome. This is exciting. We have a revenue split that we have set up with our writers. And so, they've got, something in hand to show
Mm.
for this happening. But from that point on, we can never predict what's going to happen. We can only do our
Yeah.
best to sort of keep it moving forward.
And that revenue piece, is that something new that you guys have established, or is that something that's always been in place
No, we've always
with the writers?
done revenue share, yeah, because Texas
Yeah.
Monthly is for I think almost all of its history owned its IP. That was just sort of how it was
Mhm.
set up at the outset, and so that gives me a lot of flexibility to just to read and get excited and to be sort of hyping up as many of our stories and writers as I can. I think of myself sometimes as a PR person almost. Uh, because I'm just singing the praises of these stories and trying
Yeah.
to sell people on my excitement for them. Um, but yeah, that's been in place for decades. So
And I think for people in journalism that I talk to, a lot of people see adaptation as, the pot at the end of the journalism rainbow from a money perspective. They see these big budgets. Like, how true or false is that in reality?
oh man, it really varies, and it's all in how a project is set up.
Hmm.
I don't think we're nowhere near being able to sustain the magazine on our Hollywood efforts at this point.
Hmm.
But it is becoming a meaningful piece of our
Mm.
overall revenue, and it's unpredictable. So we don't want to get too excited about where that could go. But it's meaningful money, and the key is you actually getting something all the way to production, because that's where all of that kicks in. That
Got it.
an option fee is. And I don't know if I'm using a term you're familiar with, but the
Why don't you
option is.
walk through what it means? Yeah.
Sure. Okay. So often when somebody is excited about a story, we decide it's a good fit. They will option it for a fee for a period of time. So say a year, and that gives them the exclusive right to develop it in consultation with us. And we like to be very active producers and make sure that we're both helpful and sort of protecting the brand of the magazine and of our reputation with Texans and the way
Hmm.
Texans are depicted, right? All of that. So, when that option runs out, either, before the option runs out, hopefully it's already been pitched and bought by a streamer or a network. If it doesn't, they can renew. But then getting it put into development also doesn't necessarily trigger purchase, right? The purchase doesn't happen until cameras are rolling. And so that's where the bigger fees start coming in. And then if you actually have a number of episodes and you have episodic fees and those kinds of things, that's when it starts to really change the bottom line.
And is that different for you all, whether it's TV or a movie?
I think, again, every project is different and they are set up in different ways, but that stuff is so above my pay grade. We have a brilliant entertainment attorney and we have agents who know this world and, backward and forward and kind of know what we're looking for and what's fair and what we should be fighting for. One of the things, sorry.
Please.
I was just going to say, one of the things that's most important to us in any of these projects is that there's an on-screen credit that says, based on the Texas Monthly story by, Katie Vine, whoever it might be, so that people are they're getting exposed to our storytelling and hopefully coming back to the website, becoming subscribers, helping to sort of build our audience in that way. And so that's been our stated goal from the beginning and one of the most important things for us in any project that we undertake.
Yeah, you mentioned the agency role. That's another kind of like word that I feel like a lot of people don't really know what it means or kind of maybe understand part of what it means. What is, and it's CAA in your case, what role do they play in the process? And then what role have they played in this kind of evolution for you guys as in building out this part of what the publication does?
They've been incredible. I mean, I don't think we would be where we are without the team that we have there. And our lead agent, Ann Blanchard, is a Texan herself. She grew up in Dallas and is an absolute force of nature who's brought a number of other agents in scripted TV and non-scripted TV and features. So we have a number of people at the agency who we're checking in with regularly, who are, connecting us with people looking for projects. And they are a massive engine for a lot of the conversations that we have. So I couldn't overstate what their importance is in all of this.
Hello, I'm Albert Samaha. I'm an award-winning journalist at The Washington Post, author most recently of the book Concepcion, and the guest editor of the Sunday Long Reads True Crime Spotlight newsletter. Check out our monthly newsletter, where I'm curating the best true crime stories, from thrilling narratives through little-known underworlds to investigations that expose corporate or police misconduct. You can subscribe at sundaylongread.com/truecrime. That's sundaylongread.com/truecrime. Hope you'll join us. Peace.
I want to talk about a couple of specific projects. You talked about Love and Death a little bit. I'm curious what that process was like, obviously, and then getting some big name stars of the screen involved as well. But how that came to be.
I can't speak too much actually to the origin of that project because it actually preceded my coming into this role. Yeah. But it was, I don't think, for the first project of ours to come out into the world, we couldn't have had a better project than Love and Death with, David E. Kelley writing, Leslie Lincoln Glatter, the head of the DGA and just legendary director herself, and a Texan, actually. And then it was really exciting to see, these casting announcements come through, and Elizabeth Wilson, Jesse Plemons, Tom Pelphrey, all of these incredible people who made it. I think they did such a beautiful job and found the humanity in that story, which is dark, and it is true crime, and it is really grisly in the end there. But it was, I think, the best version of that story that could have possibly been told, and the fact that HBO Max were the partners there. I think that they are incredible creative partners and do such prestige kind of storytelling that that we couldn't have asked for a better first project out into the world.
Yeah, and then Hitman, as I mentioned, on Netflix, and I know that also emerged from a long-term relationship between the director Richard Linklater and Skip Hollandsworth, the legendary Texas Monthly writer. I'm curious kind of how the buzz around that project has impacted you, or how much you felt that even before it comes out, what the expectations might be for what it might mean for the project that you're developing on a wider scale there.
I mean, it's hugely exciting for us, and I've gotten to see the film in theaters, and it will be in theaters, select theaters May 24th before it goes onto Netflix. And I think it's one of those movies that's so much fun to see in the theater. Apparently, at every screening, there's this moment in the film where the whole audience applauds. I mean, just everybody's just in it, and so, I mean, Richard Linklater is an absolute gem of a person and such a talented writer director, and he'd done Bernie previously with Skip, I don't know if you know the backstory of the story, but of this project, but he'd long thought this was a really interesting article, and just couldn't find kind of the like special sauce that really made it undeniable. And Glenn Powell had come to him and said, "I know what it is. I know what we need to do," and sort of added that sort of romance element and some of the which the seeds of which were in the article. Kudos to Skip, because that guy. I don't know anyone who can create characters the way that Skip does. But yeah, that's going to be. I think it's going to be a really successful film. It's getting great reviews, and I think we're thrilled. It's actually going to have its premiere in Austin in May, so right down the street from our offices. So that feels really good for us too, right in our hometown.
Yeah, it's so fantastic. I can't wait to watch it myself and see kind of, like you were saying, what impact it has on maybe other directors being inspired to look at some of these other magazine articles from the past and what might be possible. You touched on a little bit the financial elements of this and the publicity and power of having Texas Monthly name attached to these projects. I'm curious why Texas Monthly does this. It's obviously a lot of work. Like you're saying, a lot of times it doesn't lead to anything. What ultimately is the mission of your department at Texas Monthly?
I mean, it is an audience play, really. It is. It is all about. There was this conversation a few years back about we are a magazine. Yes, we have a website, but we're storytellers, and the stories that we tell can exist in many mediums. And so Stephen Harrigan wrote in our 50th anniversary issue about how we're now a diversified media company, which sounded very formal to me, but we are doing that. The idea is that our brand is great storytelling, and we can do that across a bunch of different platforms. And so the big thing is just we want to be able to sustain the magazine and be able to keep telling these stories. And, it's such a beloved institution here in Texas, and I think for a lot of people outside of the state too. So it's, sustaining the great work that everybody's already doing. And we're very lucky that we have ownership who have been willing to invest in the magazine and really help us sort of build all of this out so that we can get to these, to this place where we're really, so that we can get to this place of success across all of the different platforms and keep the magazine going for 50 more years.
Yeah, no, totally. And how do you personally think about it? I mean, we talked a little bit before, but maybe it's worth walking through what your background was in journalism beforehand and how you feel like this role that you play fits into the journalism world of today.
I was a copy editor when I started out, and a copy chief for in a couple different roles, and always had was part of the sausage making, but in a very sort of critical, discreet way. And I think one of the things that's so exciting and fun about this role is that it's so creative. It is, getting to really take the stories that we're telling and imagine what they could be from there, and imagine new lives for them. And so it's been a really fun transition for me. And I think, the podcast space too, we're doing that differently than most other, almost everybody's pivoted away from narrative podcasts, from the limited series yet again, the limited series is a difficult thing to pull off because there's so much investment, and it's so time consuming. And but that's another place where we're saying, we do great long form storytelling. We're not going to be the place to have the celebrity chat show. We don't have the staff for that. We don't, it'd be very tough for us to find the right fit for Texas Monthly to do something like that. And so, we make these beautiful narrative podcasts that we have real confidence will end up being optioned, end up being, that much more exciting for people to develop because they're so much more three-dimensional. You're hearing the voices, you've got the score. We've got an incredible musician and director of audio, and Brian Standifer, who does so much of that beautiful work. So, it's just about, we know what we do well, and continuing to do that in all these new places is really exciting.
Yeah, and I want to ask about documentaries too. But while we're on podcasts, is that something you feel is easier to adapt? Nothing's easy, but is that process a little easier?
To adapt into TV or film projects?
Yeah, to get adapted. Yeah, to get people interested in Hollywood.
Yeah, I do think there's so much more that they can grab onto. When they can hear the voices of the characters, and there is sort of so much scene setting that our writers do a great job of doing that on the page, but there is, just so much more that jumps out to people about what the world could be, that I think makes them, really exciting. And there's just so much more material there too. If you're talking about a 7 or 8 episode, that many hours of reporting, and storytelling, there's just it's a lot more meat on the bone for people who want to dig into it.
Yeah, that makes sense to me. And on the documentary side, you guys are producing more of your own documentary work. It seems like. You tell me if I'm wrong. How much of that is something you see potential and potentially taking some of that nonfiction storytelling you're doing and pitching for adaptation into other forms as well? Yeah,
it's the documentary space is really interesting for us because often, our reporter will write a great story and then the story's done. And it takes a unique kind of story or subject where there's that much more that you could explore in documentary form. So it's been tricky for us to figure out which of those things, fit into that category. And, we've talked about trying to partner earlier on in the reporting process with filmmakers, but getting that right and not interrupting the reporting, not not causing issues for the reporter and getting the actual piece they need to get, are all things that we're still trying to work out. So, but we have worlds. It's the worlds thing again, right? There's the world of barbecue. That we have a project in development around that, and then there's also this opportunity that we've found where, because we've got a bigger profile in this space now, people are coming to us and saying, hey, I've got a project. I think it might be a fit for you guys. And we get to evaluate that. And we've been able to, during the strikes, actually, this was a decision we made just knowing that, there wasn't a lot happening in Hollywood at the time, that, these stories were stories that felt very much of a piece with what we do. Felt very on brand for us, really talented people with great access. And so that's been a really fun and educational opportunity to really sort of be in the mix in a different way on a project where we're actively, we are investors as well as producers and sort of involved on a business level as well as a creative level, and, trying to figure out the path to a sale for those things. So we're very excited about the 2 projects we've got going. One of them has been announced and is with Deb Eskenazi, who's an incredible doc filmmaker who's based here in Austin. And the other one I think we'll be announcing soon. So
that's fantastic. How much more potential do you see there, or do you have a vision of what you see that looking like in 3 or 5 or more years?
I have great aspirations to figure out.
What are your great aspirations?
Well, so, I think there's a lot of really interesting stuff happening right now. And there's nothing better than finding the right project with the studio and getting something in development and working with the right executives and and having that kind of platform. But it's really interesting to see, a lot of people are getting creative in how they finance projects. And, television didn't used to be something that people independently financed, but there's a lot of people looking at that model now. And I think that's really interesting. I think there's, there are a lot of people out there in Texas specifically, but, throughout the country who have money who want to invest in this space in some way. And there are some really cool programs that I think are out there and in development that sort of help those people find the right projects and the promising filmmakers. And I think finding ways for us to make those connections too, so that we can jumpstart some of the projects we really believe in. Those are the kind of things that right now they're twinkles in the eye, but I think there is a lot of opportunity there too. And the landscape is just constantly changing.
Right. I'm curious, that's exactly what I wanted to ask, is how you decide, what to prioritize or which path to go down. I was at Sports Illustrated before my current job, and I was there, doing similar things of going through the archive, looking for stories to option. For a while we had SI Studios, for a while we had our own SI streaming service. I think there's so many different ways you can go about leveraging this stuff. How do you think about the best way? Because, having the stories, which is the resource, and then figuring out the best way to get the most out of them.
Man, I think you've got to know what people are looking for in order to. Okay, I say that, but actually, I think it when you see it, right? Like there are just stories that make so much sense because they do jump off the page, or they have just a beautiful arc, and and I think it's sort of this gut instinct. In many ways. And then it is really helpful, though, also to be constantly talking to people who are creatives about the kinds of stories they love, the things that resonate for them, and to sort of constantly have that spark ideas about, the things that make sense to be pitching in a certain moment, or the path for a story in a given moment.
Yeah, absolutely. Running out of time here. I just have a couple minutes left, and I want to ask what you think. Our audience are mainly people who work in journalism or love journalism, have dedicated their lives to it in one way or another. What is the journalism world's biggest misunderstanding about Hollywood, about what Hollywood's looking for, about how Hollywood judges journalism, about what they think of journalists? What should we know now that you've kind of put one foot in each of these two worlds?
I will say there is tremendous respect for journalists in Hollywood, because journalists are doing all that hard work to get the story and to put it together in a way that jumps off the page. That's the beauty of. I can't say what we do because I can't claim to to be someone who's been in that role, but that's what journalists do. There's a lot of gratitude for the art. As well as sort of the science of journalism. And there's a lot of really smart, really creative people in Hollywood. It's not all just glad handing and that kind of thing. I think I've found there are some really wonderful people who work in that space who really care about storytelling and who are so thoughtful too in what they do with an article or a podcast or whatever else. They really do want to do it justice. And that's been very heartening to experience.
Yeah. And the other half of that, I'm curious what your level of belief is in the following two statements. One, that this kind of adaptation work allows for more creative forms of journalism. We've talked about, opening up the doors for podcasting or more investing in some of this original storytelling. And then two, to get people to actually read, which, Sunday Long Read, it's in our name. It's something we care deeply about. I'm guessing it's something you care about too. I'm curious how you feel like the work you're doing and just this larger movement of taking these stories from print to screen maybe has a way to enliven journalism, both from the writing and the reading perspective.
Yeah, we see massive upticks in readership of our stories when these projects come out. There is proof in the pudding that people are, blown away that something was based on a true story, and they go searching for,
Yeah, I know I've done that for sure.
Yeah, So I think, that alone, it brings people into an understanding of like, the great work that's being done that they might not otherwise see, given, the takeovers of social media and the difficulty of impressions of the media, of journalism, in many corners right now. And so I think there is something really valuable about the attention that it's bringing to the work that our teams do.
Fantastic. Well, Megan, thank you so much for your time joining us today on the podcast.
It was such a pleasure. Thank you for having me, Jacob.
Of course. This episode of the Sunday Long Read podcast was produced by Joe Levin and Etienne Lejoie. The co-founders of the Sunday Long Read newsletter are Don Van Natta Jr. and me, Jacob Feldman. If you like the podcast, you can support us by following us on one of your favorite platforms or all of them. And make sure to check out the newsletter if you haven't already. You can join us for free at sundaylongread.com/subscribe. Until next time, thanks so much.